Hello, is this thing on? Hello, I'm Benton RP, and I wanted to talk to you about understanding why so many Star Wars fans are backlashing at their own franchise, Lucasfilm, and the current Star Wars movies, also known as the sequel trilogy. I wanted to do it in a way that was not aggressive. A lot of Star Wars fans are really upset over the direction that the franchise has been going, and it's hard to understand why if you haven't been an expert or professor in the entire Star Wars universe. So it just might look like a bunch of angry fan people, when in fact it's actually more than that. And I wanted to explain why so many people who claim they're fans don't go and see these movies, and have kind of sworn them off. And most importantly, I wanted to explain why they seem to contain such a hatred for these things which they claim that they love. And it really can be explained. It all has to do with understanding the original Star Wars movies. The original Star Wars that lasted from 1977 to 83 was a real blockbuster event for each one of the three movies that came out, completing a trilogy of just good storytelling, great ideas. I want you to know that that's not easy to do. Was never easy to do. Not in the 80s, 90s, never. In modern day, I mean, you can make a blockbuster film, and that's a stroke of genius. But if you make a sequel to it, and that doesn't tank, that actually keeps fans on board and honors the original without copying it, well, that's repeated genius. But to make a trilogy, I don't know if it's ever been done. Maybe Planet of the Apes, arguably, back in the 60s. It's never really been done to where it was actually good story, great storytelling, it was successful, and it kept the fans on board. It didn't alienate or destroy any of them. So I wanted to explain that the storyline was based on something great, and it's not easy to do. We saw that even the creator, George Lucas, you think that because he's the creator, he can create another great story. Failed. He made the original trilogy, he made the original trilogy and then the prequels, and they didn't live up to the original trilogy. Any story writer would know that just because you want to create greatness and you have done it before, it doesn't mean that it's a guaranteed success that you will in the future. Greatness it's very difficult to grasp. It takes a very direct line of inspiration to really push you towards that realm of greatness. And just because you did it once doesn't mean it's guaranteed that all your products are gonna reach that success in the future. So that replicated greatness is something that a lot of people have animosity towards. When they take a great idea and then they modernize it, a lot of people just say that that's not as great as the originals, and they are not right. In a lot of ways, the Star Wars backlash is no different from a lot of smaller backlashes that have been coming up throughout the years. With the Transformers series being remade, Ninja Turtles being remade, everything being remade, a lot of people will say it's not as great as the original. And that's because they're great ideas being modernized, but they aren't original ideas, they're not based on their own ideas. So that's basically the essential gist of the Star Wars backlash. You'd have a lot of people who know greatness when they see it. I happen to think that the original Ninja Turtles cartoon has some great themes in it. But a lot of people look at it and they see junk. There's a lot of that thrown in there too, of course. It's a kid's cartoon, and there's a lot of commercialization thrown in there that's utter garbage, or there's trash in it, So the thing is that it had an original idea and the potential to be great, but when they don't make it exactly the same, when the world changes and it no longer stays as relevant in these modern times to make something that takes place, in an old time day, then people will, try to update it in order to make it relevant to modern times. But what they really need is a new idea, because that idea was applicable to that timeline. It was said in that way for a perfect story, or a story that was near perfect, and you can't really deviate from that. You can't really cherry pick from it and then make your own story and say, now that's greatness because it has greatness in it. That's chocolate chip cookies with raisins instead of chocolate chips. You basically follow the recipe, but you don't have everything in the correct place. You have to create your original idea. You have to create your original story and base everything on that. That's the source of inspiration that's missing for modernizing great ideas. The reason why Star Wars has gotten so big or stayed so big is because it kind of has an immunity factor to this handicap of having to be set in the time period that the originating story was made in. You have Ninja Turtles has to take place in the 80s, otherwise you'd have to rewrite the story to include social media, smartphones, cell phones, things like that. Now, the environmental crisis, current politics, things like that, things that are always more relevant to us nowadays, or more ever present nowadays in our lives than they might have been before. It might have been sacrosanct more before, and then they could avoid the topic. Now they're more commonplace, more ubiquitous, and we have so much more to engage in if we're gonna adapt the movie, modernize it. But where Star Wars is unique is that it's exempt from a lot of those, in that it takes place a long time ago, and it's a fictional universe. So you can actually forget about social media. You can actually forget about current politics and political messaging, and that's where it has kind of an unfair advantage. And of course, that advantage has not been taken advantage of by Disney, and much to the chagrin of most diehard fans. It was really the perfect formula for escapism, and that might not be the number one source of fuel for their anger, but it is something to consider as to how drastically they took the franchise in a different direction. Not everything needs to be modernized. In fact, a lot of these companies might think of it as a sort of a handicap that they have to bring a great franchise into modern times in order to make it relevant. And that handicap could have been avoided in Star Wars. But there might have been this fear in Disney that, if we try to do that, it might just not be relevant. But I think that was a miscalculation. A lot of fans like myself, a lot of these fans are diehard fans, and they would love it for the escapism that they originally came in there for. So there was a perfect opportunity to create more fantasy and more of the same feeling, the same emotion, timeless emotion that was evoked from the great movies that originally started and blew up the franchise. But it wasn't taken because they approached it the same way that they would a modern day Ninja Turtles or a modern day Batman movie. Or you're trying to make Iron Man relevant, so you put modern things in there that weren't in the comics. They approached it that way and hoped that it would be as successful as the Marvel comic movies have been. But it was not necessary. I think that this was the perfect opportunity for them to get into a escapism, far away galaxy, long time ago. We don't have any of those sort of things. And people would have related to it. I don't know if there's any other franchise that can do that. Everything seems to be a period piece to take place in a certain era or need to be updated in order to be relevant, except for Star Wars. You could do Star Trek, and they didn't do that with that. That's another franchise that's been updated. But I don't really know if its update is really applicable, because it takes place far into the future. So they just put more drama in it and had a different style to it, and probably changed the themes a bit from what Roddenberry would have wanted. But I think that not only is their adaptation into modern times misplaced, but their ability to tell a story is also understandably insufficient, because greatness is not something that you can just easily come up with or adapt from another story. You have to be inspired towards it. And usually when you are inspired, it's inspired to create something, not to alter something that already exists. That can be seen as, okay, if I alter this piece of clay, sure, greatness can come out of this sculpture that someone would make. I do sculpt sometimes. However, something that already exists as great, altering that, usually it's just kind of seen as a kind of like a from behind the back move, like, hey, you're just riding on the coattails move. You're just taking something that's great because you yourself want to be that great. I honestly think that it's a lot more trickier. It's a lot trickier than coming up with your own original idea. So, even though there's a boycott, there's a lot of people, including myself, who say that I just don't have the time for bad movies. I understand what you're trying to do, but it's not inspiring at all, and it's not the direction that you should be taking. I don't have the time to see every one of these. I originally became a fan for Star Wars because of the deep meaning, because of the themes that it encompassed. When I connected to what they were saying about societies, things like that, then that moved me. There were lessons in life. What lessons are these films they're trying to copy something, they're trying to make you feel a certain way, but what's the overall meaning? It's not there. And I don't have time to continue seeing movie after movie after movie where it's just not there. And it's trying to copy something. And then they put something familiar that looks a little bit different in it. Looks a little bit like, hey, you remember. And, that's an emotional roller coaster. What's it for? I don't have the energy for it. And a lot of people, hatred aside, some people just don't have the energy for it, to go through that emotional roller coaster. To go through that emotional roller coaster every 6 months or every year that they decide that they're going to put out another film. So, we just decided, we're going to have better things to do with our time. And that's not a crime. It's not a crime to without hatred, go about and say, I'm just not interested anymore. But I don't think it's Star Wars fatigue, as a lot of people have said ever since Solo came out, which is just a couple of weeks ago. I'm recording this a couple of weeks after Solo came out. I think that it was Last Jedi fatigue. I think that people just saw the direction it was going, and in The Last Jedi, they got tired from seeing where it was going. The original trilogy, it was counter productive to the original trilogy. It was kind of like the opposite message. It was the antithesis to the original trilogy, and that made people tired. It made their brains hurt, you know. Of course, it made a lot of people angry, as you've seen online and all that, but those angry people, even their brains hurted. Excuse me, even their brains got hurt. So I think that even though that people can recognize when their original inspiration and the great ideas behind them are being suppressed, misused, mistreated, manipulated, things like that, and they will refuse to see a bad movie, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are immune from seeing a good Star Wars movie. It doesn't mean that they're swearing off all good movies that have the Star Wars label from here on into the future. If they are able to be inspired that same way, and I'll get to that in a minute, then I believe that the fans will go and see those movies in droves. How can you make a great movie that's Star Wars if that's not copying the original inspiration? Well, I actually think it's doable because this franchise is exempt from a lot of the modern staples that you have to trope into a movie in order to make it work. Being said a long time ago, in a galaxy away, it's going to be easy for them to say that, hey, you like Star Wars, this is fantasy escapism. And you get creative with the designs and the teams. You don't just go for like what they remember. Those things can be easily reinvented to new things, but you stick with the theme of this is escapism, and you can avoid the whole messy operation of trying to modernize an ancient or a great or a legendary franchise. So I think that Star Wars fans will come back if the movies are worthy and if they honor the original sentiment of the Star Wars films. These ones don't have the same sentiment, these new ones. And I think that that sentiment is what people are really looking for when they go into the theater. You know, I was told a lot of people hated The Empire Strikes Back. They hated The Empire Strikes Back when it first came out because it left on a cliffhanger. But like I said, the deep meaning was there, and that's what made me a fan of it. What made me a fan of The Empire Strikes Back is the fact that even though you didn't get answers to the questions that were sort of driving the plot in the entire movie, you still did get a complete story. And it still was, without lecturing you, without forcing it in on you, telling you a message. It was still teaching you a lesson in a very engaging and emotionally driven way. It wasn't pressing it on you. It wasn't demeaning you. It was really good at storytelling, leading you on. And that is that this guy right here was, champion after A New Hope. He had nothing to lose. He blew up the Death Star. He was a warrior. He felt like now we can take on the Empire, and it all comes crumbling down. How could someone so great fall in just one movie? It's because he was so young, and it had so much responsibility. All of that power that he got so early, it built up a lot of pressure. Great opportunity, and it takes experience to manage that. And I think that's what Yoda was trying to impart on him. But, he has an opportunity to save his friends. He has an opportunity to destroy the bad guy who helped bring this galaxy into oppression. And he lost sight of what's right and wrong. Walking into a trap, uh, not heeding the warning that there's more power here than you realize. And the beautiful thing about Empire Strikes Back is that the power is not in, hey, this guy is your father. I didn't plan all these toys here. I always have them constantly laying around the house. That this guy is your father. That you're going to be torn. What your legacy is, whether to rule the galaxy, or whether to, kill your own father because he's evil. The beautiful thing about it is that he was prevented from knowing exactly the right answer because Obi-Wan, in the original trilogy, before the prequels, thought of Anakin as a really good friend. And he did not have the heart to tell Anakin's son, I saw your father turn evil. Your father is evil. He just said that your father is gone, and a dark force killed him. Because he loved Anakin so much as an apprentice and a pupil. And that's what Luke couldn't see. The sensitive farm boy who was weak and cowering and always directed what to do and had to behave and had to act gentle. He couldn't see the gentleness that he escaped from it because he was so willing to escape from it in order to dive into action. So the beautiful thing about it is that the first movie showed that he knew about intricacies and sensitivities that a person like Han Solo wouldn't. A person like Princess Leia wouldn't. He was more of a gentle soul. And that gentle soul characteristic has the power to overtake even the most monstrous technological advantage or advanced weapon, if you will, if you just realize the attention to detail that it could give you, and the sort of, I guess, the delicate effect you can have on even the greatest things. And it's powerful enough to destroy the greatest weapon, which is something we want to believe in life. It's true, and indeed it can happen. We all want to believe something like that can happen. And the second one, Empire Strikes Back, goes on to say through the same character that, even though you did this great thing, and even though you want to become as powerful a warrior as Han Solo, someone who you obviously owe to saving you more than once, and you're trying to be tough, and you're trying to go out and fight this guy. You have to go back to your roots. You have to remember the person that you were. You have to remember that there are gentle things that rule the universe. And this is intertwined with the cosmic, the mysticism of the Force being present in this galaxy, yet feeling real enough for us to relate in our neck of the woods. This kind of meaning is what, whether it's known or not, Star Wars fans feel when they watch the original movies. And that's what made them great. This kind of meaning can't be derived from the modern trilogy. There's subsections and subsections of checkpoints that they have to make sure that they include, and that they have to they have to check off. They have to make sure that they take care of updating it, modernizing it. They have to take care of, throw a bit of nostalgia in there. They have to make sure, like, throw a reference in there. Make sure that it's like this, people like this about it, people like this about it. And of course, that makes it devoid of a solid original idea, but it also detracts from you concentrating, or the story writers or the creative team concentrating on making it mean anything, having a deep meaning, driving it, making sure it is driven by deep meaning. When you have all of those categories that you're trying to knock out. So, I think that the fans are a lot of them are upset, but even the upset ones can agree. Some of them will never be satisfied, but most of them, even most of the upset ones, will agree that we would all be satisfied as rational people, as the rational minds in this, if Disney would put great storytelling first, if they have a great story to tell first. That's what the original ones seemed to do. They seemed to put storytelling first because George Lucas had a story to tell, and he wanted to tell it, and that's what drove the other elements to take place. The Ralph McQuarrie drawings being inspired to be adapted into this sort of complicated and really elaborate universe that a lot of other people collaborated and got involved with and worked on so hard, so immensely. It was all driven by the want to tell a great story. If Disney did that, I think we would find that a lot of the fans will be more sympathetic, will be understanding, will be receptive, will be more appreciative. So, of course, we know how Disney has been reacting. They really did call a lot of the fans Russian bots, white supremacists, sexists. I think they called all the detractors, the people who didn't like The Last Jedi, all of those things. And that only fueled the anger. If you're wondering why the fans are angry, why there's a backlash, that didn't help. That only perpetuated it. So, I'd have to say that the fans would be angry about that, rightfully so. Why would you go and support a company that is treating you so badly and saying you have to see our movies, we're too big to fail, and you're gonna eat it and you're gonna like it? I'm not gonna do it. I think a lot of people have more self-respect than Disney thought. They, are independent. They know that they're free to do whatever they want with their money, and they just decided, I'm not going to be treated this way. Good for them. Good for them. In fact, I applaud anyone who decided, I don't like the way I'm being treated and I'm not going to take it. That's what I felt and why I stopped seeing them. I even debated about not seeing The Last Jedi in theaters because I heard that they were sort of abusing their theater privileges or making a deal where the theater had to give them 70% of the profit. And that it hurt smaller theaters to always abide by this contract throughout the runtime of The Last Jedi. Make sure that they use their biggest screen for Last Jedi and nothing else. The bigger theaters can take it. They have multiple screens. But the smaller ones, they have very few screens. And they got hurt by that. And I said, what kind of business is this? Do I want to be supporting this business? So I went on like a $5 movie day so that it wasn't so, it wasn't so devastating to, it wasn't, yeah. They didn't lose a lot of money there. I wanted to see the film, but I regret it. I could have just watched the videos online the way that I did Solo and learned exactly what the backlash is, learned what the storyline was and the flaws within it and what they were trying to do. I haven't seen Solo, and I understand exactly what Disney was trying to do. I understand from the reviews, I understand from the explanations and the critics online and the independent reviewers exactly how this scene would have felt for me as a original trilogy diehard Star Wars fan, an OT fan as they would call it. So I hope that this explains exactly what is going on a little bit clearer. Maybe if you couldn't find a calm voice, I hope that I explained some things adequately about why things are being boycotted. If you don't understand it, the only thing that I could tell you is, maybe you're not a Star Wars fan. Of course you could be a Star Wars fan, but if you know you are, check out the original trilogy a little bit more. And there's nothing wrong with not being a Star Wars fan. I didn't mean it that way. I mean, like, if you know you don't like the stuff, why waste your time, right? But if you think you like it, just maybe giving the original trilogy another try. That's not easy to do. There's editions where George Lucas tried to add too many brush strokes to his masterpiece painting, and he kind of messed it up. But if you could find the original movies, and I wish it was allowed to upload them online, and you could see the 1977 Star Wars, the 1980 Empire Strikes Back, the 1983 Return of the Jedi, because those were the originals before too many brush strokes were added on the painting, and those were the ones that propelled Star Wars to blockbuster status and complete trilogy fame status, which is near impossible to do for any franchise. And those are the original ideas that really weren't tampered with. And it would be nice to go back and see them. I have them in my DVD collection, but nevertheless, they are hard to find. And I think that it is hard. If I couldn't persuade you, if I couldn't dissuade any of your critique over the boycotting fan base or the Star Wars fans backlash, then I think those would be the best thing to go to. Those original Star Wars trilogies, those original Star Wars movies, the original trilogy, in order to understand exactly what Star Wars is and what it was for a long time, nearly 20 years, and what a lot of fans wish or think that it should continue to be. I didn't rehearse this, so sorry if that was clunky, but thank you so much for watching, sticking around, and letting me share my thoughts with this. I hope that I'll hear some comments in the section that'll make sure that I'm not completely off the wall, that they agree with me, that you agree with me on at least some of the things. I'd appreciate any comments below. I know that it's a lot of people will disagree and stuff like that, and it takes a lot of energy to get into an argument. Sorry if you do disagree, but even if you do, you can still let me know your thoughts below. Let's keep it civil. Let's be nice to each other. May the force be with you. I hope everyone has a nice day. Good luck.